Let's read some fairy tale. We're reading Grimm Tales by Philip Pullman. And today's story is Snow White. One winter's day, when the snowflakes were falling like feathers, a queen sat sewing at her window, which had a frame of the blackest ebony. Ah, I would love a cuddle pile, that would be great. She opened the window to look up at the sky, and as she did so she pricked her finger, and 3 drops of blood fell into the snow on the windowsill. The red and the white looked so beautiful together that she said to herself, "I wish I had a child as white as snow, as red as blood, and as black as the wood in the window frame." And soon afterwards she had a little daughter, and she was as white as snow, and as red as blood, and as black as ebony, so they called her Little Snow White. As soon as the baby was born, the queen died, because this is a fairy tale, and there cannot be a living mother, ever, apparently. A year later, the king married another wife. She was a beautiful woman, but she was proud and arrogant, and she couldn't bear to think that anyone was more beautiful than she was. If I wouldn't die, I'd say that we should go to Burning Man. I would love to go to Burning Man. Someday when we can safely go to America again. Sorry, I'm very easily distracted. Stop distracting me. A year later, the king married another wife. She was a beautiful woman, but she was proud and arrogant, and she couldn't bear to think that anyone was more beautiful than she was. She had a magic mirror, and every morning she used to stand in front of it and gaze at her reflection and say, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who in this land is the fairest of all?" And the mirror would reply, "Your Majesty, you are the fairest of all." She was satisfied then, because she knew that the mirror could only tell the truth. But meanwhile Snow White was growing up. When she was 7 years old she was as lovely as a spring day, and even more beautiful, in fact, than the queen. So one day when the queen asked her mirror, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who in this land is the fairest of all?" the mirror answered, "Your Majesty, you are still lovely, it's true, but Snow White is 1,000 times fairer than you." Immediately the queen took fright. Envy churned in her bowels, and her flawless complexion took on a sickly yellow-green. From that moment on she only had to look at Snow White to feel her heart tightening with malice. Her envy and pride grew strong like a weed in her soul, and she felt no peace by day or by night. Finally she called one of the king's huntsmen and said to him, "Take that child deep into the woods. I never want to set eyes on her again. Make sure she's dead, and bring me her lungs and liver as proof." The huntsman did as she ordered. When he had taken Snow White far into the heart of the forest, he took out his knife and was about to thrust it into her innocent heart, when she began to cry, "Oh, please, dear huntsman, spare my life. I'll run away into the wild woods and never come home again, I promise." She was so beautiful that the huntsman took pity on her and said, "You poor child, go on then, run away. The wild beasts will eat her soon in any case," he thought, but knowing that he wouldn't have to kill her was like feeling a heavy weight lift from his heart. Because abandoning a 7-year-old in a forest is totally different and completely ethical. Just then a young boar came running through the bushes. The huntsman killed it and cut out its lungs and liver and took them back to the queen as proof of Snow White's death. The queen is clearly not a druid. The cook was ordered to season them well, dredge them in flour and fry them up, and the wicked queen ate them all up. And that, she thought, was the end of Snow White. But meanwhile Snow White was alone in the great forest, with no idea what to do or where to go. She looked all around, but nothing she could see among the leaves and the bushes was any help. She was frightened, and she began to run, ignoring the sharp stones and the brambles and the small animals that leapt at her. She ran, and just as the light was fading, and the evening was near, she saw a little cottage. She knocked, but there was no one at home, so she went inside, hoping to rest. What is it in fairy tales about how people just randomly walk into other people's houses all the time? What's up with that shit? That is not polite. Everything in the house was small, but very neat and clean. There was a pot of stew beside the fire, and a little table covered with a snowy white tablecloth, on which stood 7 little bowls, with a slice of bread beside each one, and 7 little knives and forks and spoons, and 7 little mugs. Upstairs there were 7 little beds, all standing in a row, all neatly made with snow-white linen, and a little table beside each bed with a little glass and a little toothbrush. Snow White was very hungry and thirsty, So she ate some stew from the pot, and took a bite of each slice of bread, and a sip of wine from each mug. And then she realized how tired she was, so she lay down on one of the beds, but it was too big, and she tried another, but it was too short. But the seventh one was just right. Suddenly we fell into Goldilocks there for a second. So she said her prayers and lay down and closed her eyes and was asleep in a moment. Presently, when it was dark, the owners of the cottage came home. They were 7 dwarfs, and they earned their living by mining for precious ore under the mountains. They came in and lit their lanterns, and then they saw that things were not as they had left them. Ah, poor Artbeck. That's what happens when you sneakily watch Twitch when you're working, eh? Someone's been sitting in my chair. Someone's been eating from my bowl. There's a bite out of my bread, look. The ladle's been used. Someone's eaten some stew. And they've used my knife, and they've used my fork, and they've drunk from my mug. They looked at each other with wide eyes. Then they all looked up at the ceiling, and they all tiptoed up the stairs, and they all looked at their beds and whispered, Someone's tried my bed, and mine, and mine, and mine, and mine, and mine. Oh, look! The 7th dwarf had found Snow White asleep. They all tiptoed up and looked at her in wonder. The lantern light shone over her face on the snowy white pillow. Good heavens, what a beautiful child! Who can she be? We can't wake her up, she's fast asleep. What a lovely face! I wonder where she came from. It's a mystery, brothers, a deep mystery. Come back downstairs. We must discuss what to do. I mean, yes, you're not wrong. I suppose if you're making a stew, you would leave it like I do that. I put a stew on and then I go to work and I leave it all day to like do its stewy thing. So, I can kind of see that. They tiptoed back downstairs and sat around the table. She looks exhausted, poor little thing. Better not wake her up. The morning will be soon enough for that. Maybe she's escaping from a witch. Fool. There's no such thing as witches. I think she's an angel. And so she might be, but she's in my bed, and where am I going to sleep? The other 6 agreed to let the 7th one share their beds, an hour each throughout the night. So he had a really shit night, is what I'm taking away from that. And so they went to sleep. When Snow White woke up in the morning and found the 7 dwarfs all looking at her, they'd woken up and got dressed already. She was alarmed. Don't be frightened, miss. We're friendly enough. Not pretty, maybe, but we won't do you any harm. That's a promise. You're safe here. What's your name, my dear? I'm called Snow White, she said. They asked where she came from, how she'd found her way to their cottage, and so on, and she told them how her stepmother had tried to kill her, and how the huntsman had spared her life, and how she'd run in a panic through the bushes and the brambles till she found their cottage. The dwarfs withdrew to the corner of the room and whispered together, and then came back and said, Wine needs time to breathe. Yes, exactly. If you'll keep house for us, sweep and clean, you know all that. And cook, don't forget cooking. Yes, and cook, and make the beds, and wash the linen, and sew and knit and darn our socks. Then you can stay with us, my dear, and you shall have everything you want. Oh, I'll do that with all my heart, said Snow White, who is a princess and has therefore probably never done any of those things in her life. But, I applaud her willingness. So they agreed on that, and Snow White began to keep house for them. Every morning they tramped off to the mountain to dig for gold and copper and silver, and when they came back in the evening their dinner was ready for them, and the cottage was neat and clean, and everything was in order. During the day, of course, Snow White was all alone, and the dwarfs warned her, Be careful. That stepmother of yours will be looking for you once she finds out you're alive. Don't let anyone in. Once the queen had eaten the liver and the lungs that she thought were Snow White's, she wasn't afraid to look in her magic mirror again and say, Mirror, mirror on the wall, who in this land is the fairest of all? But she got a terrible shock when the mirror answered, Your Majesty, you are still lovely, it's true, but far, far away in the forest so deep where she lives with the dwarfs since they found her asleep, Snow White is 1,000 times fairer than you. The queen recoiled with horror, for she knew the mirror couldn't lie, and she realized that the huntsman must have deceived her. Snow White was still alive. All her thoughts circled around one question. How could she kill Snow White? If she, the queen, wasn't the most beautiful woman in the whole country, she knew her envy would torment her day and night. At last she thought of a plan. She made up her face carefully and disguised herself as an old peddler, so skilfully that she knew no one would recognize her. She made her way to the house of the 7 dwarfs, and when they were at work down under the mountain, she knocked on the door. If you had a mirror that couldn't lie? Yeah, I can think of things that would be better to know than just whether you're the prettiest in the land. Jeez. Snow White was making the beds. Long odd horse race winners. You assume that the mirror knows the future, though. Maybe it can only tell you the truth about the present. Snow White was making the beds. She heard the knock and opened an upstairs window. "Good day," she called down. "What are you selling?" "Fine laces and pretty ribbons," the Queen called up. "Would you like to see what I have, my dear? Here's a lovely one. Look." She pulled out a lace made of braided silk. Snow White thought it was very pretty indeed, and surely this old woman had an honest face. It must be safe to let her in. Snow White's not the brightest bulb on the Christmas tree. She ran down and unbolted the door and looked at the lace. "Would you like to try it?" said the peddler woman. "Dear me, child, you need looking after. Come here, sweetie. Let me do up your bodice with this pretty lace." Snow White stood there not suspecting a thing, while the old woman threaded the lace through and through her bodice, and then pulled and pulled and pulled so tight that Snow White couldn't breathe. The poor girl's eyes fluttered and her lips moved, and then she fell down senseless. "You're not so beautiful now you're dead," muttered the old woman, and hurried away. Soon afterwards the dwarfs came home, because the day was ending. When they saw Snow White lying there, not breathing, they were terrified. They picked her up and then realized what was causing the trouble, and quickly they cut through the lace so she could breathe. Little by little she came back to life, and told them what had happened. "Well, you know who that peddler woman was, don't you? It was the wicked Queen. Couldn't have been anyone else. Don't let her in again, whatever you do. Take care, Snow White. Oh, do take care. Remember now, be on your guard. Don't let anyone in." Meanwhile the Queen was hurrying home. As soon as she was safe in her boudoir, she asked the mirror, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who in this land is the fairest of all?" And the mirror answered, "Your Majesty, you are still lovely, it's true, but they cut through the lace with a sharp little knife, and they brought their Snow White back to life, and she's still 1,000 times lovelier than you." When the Queen heard that, her heart gave a sickening lurch, and she squeezed her blood so hard she thought her eyes would burst. "Still alive? Still alive? We'll see about that," she said. "She won't be alive for long, I promise." The Queen understood the art of witchcraft, and she crushed some rare herbs while saying a spell, and then dipped a pretty comb in the herb juice. It was deadly poison. With the aid of a little more magic she changed her appearance entirely, so she didn't look at all like the previous old woman, and set off for the dwarf's cottage. She knocked on the door and called out, "Pretty knickknacks for sale, combs and pins and mirrors, pretty trinkets for pretty girls." Snow White looked out of the upstairs window and answered, "I can't let you in. I'm not allowed. You'd better go away." "That's all right, sweetheart," said the old woman. "I won't step over the threshold. I'm sure no one would mind if you took a look, though. What about this lovely comb? Here, look." It was very pretty, and Snow White thought it would do no harm just to look. She ran down and opened the door. Again, not the brightest bulb on the Christmas tree. "Oh, such lovely hair," said the old woman. "So black and so rich and shiny. But oh, a terrible tangle. When did you last brush it properly, sweetheart? Don't they look after you here?" She was running her fingers through Snow White's hair as she spoke. "Let me just tease out a tangle or two with this pretty comb. You like it, don't you? I can see. Come here, darling." Snow White obediently bent her head, and the old woman dug the comb into her scalp so viciously the poor girl fell straight down without even a cry. "That's done for you, missy. Let's see how lovely you are when you start to rot," said the Queen, and she hurried away before the dwarfs came home. Luckily it was almost evening, and not long after the wicked Queen left Snow White lying there, the dwarfs came home and found her. "Snow White, what's happened? Is she breathing? That wicked Queen again. What's that stuck in her hair? Pull it out, quick. Mind, it'll be poisoned. Careful, careful." They wrapped a handkerchief around the comb and pulled it delicately out, and almost at once Snow White sighed and opened her eyes. "Oh, dwarfs, I'm so stupid. She didn't look at all like she did before, and I thought it would be all right." They told her it would only be all right if she kept her wits about her and did as they told her. She mustn't open the door for anyone. The Queen hurried back and threw off her disguise before standing in front of the magic mirror. She said, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who in this land is the fairest of all?" And the mirror answered, Your Majesty, you are still lovely, it's true, but as soon as you'd gone the good dwarfs arrived home, and with care and with caution they took out the comb, and Snow White is alive, and far lovelier than you. That made the queen stagger and clutch at the wall. The blood drained out of her face, leaving it a dirty white, with patches of yellow and green. Then she drew herself up to her full height, and sparks flew out of her eyes. Snow White shall die, she cried. She went into her most private room and locked the door behind her. No one was allowed in there, not even the servants. Then, with the help of a book of spells and several little dark bottles, she set about making a poisoned apple. What's with the octopus, yo? This is the third, because threes are super important in fairy tales. This is the third death plot. Well, the fourth if you count the huntsman, but the third since she reached the dwarfs. It was white on one side and rosy red on the other. Anyone who saw it would want to take a bite, but if they did, even just the tiniest nibble, they would fall down dead at once. Then the queen disguised herself a third time, put the apple in her pocket, and set off for the dwarf's cottage. She knocked on the door, and Snow White looked out of the window. I can't let anyone in, she said. I'm not allowed. That's all right, my dear, said the queen, who looked like an old peasant. I just wondered if you'd like an apple. I've had such a crop this year, I don't know what to do with them all. No, I'm not supposed to take anything, said Snow White. Oh, what a pity, said the old woman. They taste so good, too. Look, I'll take a bite in case you're worried. She had made the apple so cunningly that only the red half was poisoned. Of course, she took a bite from the white half and then held it out to Snow White. It looked so delicious that the poor girl couldn't resist. She reached out through the window, took the apple, and bit deeply into the red part. And she'd hardly bitten off a piece when she fell to the floor, dead. The wicked queen leaned in and saw her lying on the floor, and she laughed a loud laugh. White as snow, red as blood, black as ebony, and now dead as a doornail. Those little monkeys won't wake you up this time. She's really mean. When she got back to her boudoir, she asked the mirror, Mirror, mirror on the wall, who in this land is the fairest of all? And the mirror answered, Your Majesty, you are the fairest of all. She sighed a deep and happy sigh of satisfaction. If an envious heart can be at rest, hers was then. When the dwarfs came home that evening, they found Snow White on the floor, stark and still. She wasn't breathing, her eyes were closed, she wasn't moving at all. She was dead. They looked around for whatever might have killed her, and found nothing. They unfastened her laces in case she couldn't breathe. They looked through her hair for a poisoned comb. They warmed her by the fire. They put a drop of brandy on her lips. They laid her on a bed, and they sat her up in a chair, but nothing helped. Then it struck home to them that she must be really dead, and they laid her out gently on a bier and sat beside her, weeping for 3 days. They had intended to bury her, but she still looked so fresh and beautiful, just as if she was only sleeping, that they couldn't bring themselves to put her under the black earth. So they had a glass coffin made and laid her inside. With letters of gold they wrote, Princess Snow White, on it, and they carried it up to a mountain top. I know, right? Can let Hardest Reset have that particular rant for me while I finish the story. Because I'm so there with you. Like, seriously, there are more important things to worry about. Holy shit. But anyway. But this is the bit that really fucks me off, is what's coming up now. From then on, one of the dwarfs stayed beside her all the time. They took it in turns to watch over her, and the birds came and mourned for her as well, first an owl, then a raven, and finally a dove. And so things remained for a long, long time. The body of Snow White did not decay, for she still looked as white as snow, as red as blood, and as black as ebony. One day a prince happened to be hunting in the forest, and he came to the dwarf's house and asked for shelter for the night. Next morning he saw the sunlight glitter on the mountain top and went to see what was there. He found the glass coffin, he read the golden inscription, and he saw the body of Snow White. He said to the dwarfs, Let me take the coffin away with me. I'll pay you as much as you want. What the fuck? Like, seriously. Hey, thanks for following us. You're awesome. Crap. Jeez. Whew. The sound came later and I got a fright. Thank you for the follow. Yeah, like, he finds this dead girl in a coffin and his thought is like, I want this shit in my house. I'm gonna buy it. Holy crap balls. Not cool. Anyway. We don't want money, they said. We wouldn't sell that coffin for all the money in the world. Then please give it to me, he begged. I've fallen in love with Princess Snow White because I'm a fucking necrophiliac. And I can't live without being able to see her. I'll treat her with all the honor and respect I'd feel for a living princess. I'm sorry, but seriously, wouldn't your response be like, what the hell is wrong with you? You are a broken person. Get some therapy. The dwarfs went away a little and spoke together quietly. Then they came back and said they'd take pity on him, and they were sure he'd treat their dear Snow White properly, so he could take her back to his kingdom. It was just a tiny soapbox. But seriously, it's fucked up. It's fucked up. No, you don't take pity on him. Well, apparently they do. I mean, to be fair, the dwarfs, turned her into a shrine, and I realize she hasn't decayed, which implies some sort of magical summon something, but, they also don't have a super healthy relationship with this girl. Right? Okay. Where were we? I got sidetracked by the craziness of the story. Oh, thank you. I'm glad you're enjoying it. We don't always do fairy tales, but we're working our way through this book at the moment. All right, here we go. Let's get to the end. The prince thanked them and told his servants to pick up the coffin with great care and carry it along with him. But as they were going down the mountainside, one of the servants tripped and stumbled and shook the coffin, and that dislodged the piece of apple from Snow White's throat, for she had never quite swallowed it. And slowly she woke up, and then she pushed open the lid of the coffin and sat up, fully alive once more. I also love how in fairy tales it's so easy to bring someone back to life, right? Dear God, where am I? She said. The prince said joyfully, You're with me! He told... I'm sorry, but can you imagine? You get attacked by your evil stepmother, you go into a coma for a while, and when you wake up, some random stranger is carrying you in a glass coffin down the mountain, and his response to what is going on is, You're with me! I'd be like, who the fuck are you? Oh, sorry, that really tickled me. No time to explain. Get it exactly. Oh, I love it. Okay. Whew, that really tickled me. Anyway, he told her everything that had happened. I feel like maybe he should have started with that. And then said, I love you more than anything else in the world. Come with me to my father's castle and become my wife. And instead of going, don't you think it's a little weird that you fell in love with the dead girl? She responds differently. Snow White loved him at once, and their wedding was arranged with great splendor and magnificence. Among the guests invited to the ceremony was Snow White's wicked stepmother. After putting on the most beautiful of her dresses, she stood in front of the magic mirror and said, Mirror, mirror on the wall, who in this land is the fairest of all? And the mirror answered, Your Majesty, you are still lovely, it's true, but the young queen's 1,000 times fairer than you. The queen gasped with horror. She was so frightened, so terrified that she didn't know what to do. She didn't want to go to the wedding, and she didn't want to stay away, and yet she felt she had to go and see the young queen, and so in the end she went. And when she saw Snow White, she recognized her at once, and was struck with horror. She could only stand there trembling. But a pair of iron shoes had already been placed in the fire. When they were red hot, they were brought out with tongs and placed on the floor, and the wicked queen was made to step into them and dance until she fell down dead. The end.